Roll down the window immediately. I said roll it down now or I'm breaking it. Rebecca? No, this can't be
What began as an ordinary traffic stop on an empty forest road turned into the moment officer Tommy Grant's whole life fell apart and stitched itself back together within just 15 minutes. What he saw behind the darkened window wasn't simply unbelievable. It was a truth so crushing it would shatter his closest bond and change everything he believed about the darkest night he ever lived through. The woman sitting behind the wheel had been dead for 5 years. Tommy had stood beside her grave, watched her coffin sink into the earth, and raised their daughter on his own ever since. Yet there she was, looking straight at him with tears pouring down her face, holding a secret that would twist his sorrow into anger and his faith into betrayal. What she told him that night led to an arrest that stunned the entire town. Her message wasn't about finding peace or saying goodbye. It was about justice for a crime everyone believed was a tragic accident, committed by the one person Tommy trusted more than anyone else. Before we go any further into this unbelievable night, we need to connect with you. This story is intense, and we truly appreciate you being here to see how it unfolds. Take a moment and tell us where you're watching from. Share your city or country in the comments below. And if you're new here, hit subscribe and tap like. Your support means everything to us, and we love seeing our community grow. Now, let's step into what happened on that cold October night. Tommy Grant had worn the badge for 12 years, and traffic stops were second nature to him. But something about this car felt off the instant he noticed it swerving along Highway 47. One headlight was dead, and a tail light flickered on and off. The vehicle drifted between lanes like the driver wasn't paying attention or was under the influence. Tommy turned on his lights and followed for nearly 2 miles before the car finally turned onto a narrow road cutting through the woods. The location was remote, thick trees blocking most of the moonlight. His instincts flared immediately. Being alone on a stop like this was dangerous. He radioed dispatch with his location and walked up carefully, his hand hovering close to his weapon. The car stayed motionless, engine running, windows still rolled up. Tommy knocked hard on the glass. No answer. He knocked again louder, announcing himself as police. Still nothing. 2 long minutes passed without any reaction from the driver. Alarms rang in Tommy's head. This wasn't nervous delay. This felt intentional. He stepped back and called for backup, his heart racing. Something was seriously wrong. Then slowly the window began to slide down. Tommy already had his flashlight raised, ready to shine it on the driver's face. What he saw next nearly made his legs give out and stole the air from his lungs. The woman behind the steering wheel had Rebecca's face. His Rebecca. Every feature, every detail just as he remembered, but Rebecca had been gone for 5 years. Tommy had personally identified her body. This couldn't be real. His flashlight slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the pavement. The woman was crying, tears streaking her cheeks, staring straight at him with a look filled with pain and urgency. Tommy felt the color drain from his face as his vision swam. He had never believed in ghosts or the supernatural, but this moment ripped apart everything he thought he knew. How would you react if someone you buried years ago suddenly stood in front of you? Tommy was about to discover that some truths are far more terrifying than any ghost tale. He stumbled backward, his shoulder bumping into the car. His training told him to stay in control, evaluate the threat, stay sharp, but his mind screamed that none of this was possible. He pressed his hands over his eyes, counted to 3, and looked again. She was still there, Rebecca. Same dark hair, same brown eyes, same faint scar above her left eyebrow from childhood. Nothing was different. Tommy's chest tightened as his breathing turned fast and shallow. The cold October air suddenly felt heavy and crushing. Rebecca slowly opened the door and stepped out. Tommy backed away at once, his legs trembling beneath him. She lifted her hands gently, like someone calming a frightened animal. When she spoke, it was the same voice he'd heard every day during 8 years of marriage. She told him to breathe. She said she knew this was too much to process. She said she didn't have much time. Tommy's back hit a tree, and he slid down to the ground, his uniform scraping against rough bark. This wasn't possible. Dead people didn't drive cars. Dead people didn't stop on lonely forest roads. Dead people stayed in the ground. Rebecca crouched several feet away, careful not to move closer. She said she understood his fear, that she had watched over him and their daughter Lily for years, but couldn't appear until tonight. Tonight was different. Tonight she finally had the strength to show herself because he needed to hear the truth. Tommy's radio crackled as dispatch confirmed backup was on the way, arriving in 12 minutes. He barely registered it. His entire focus was fixed on the woman who looked, sounded, and moved exactly like his dead wife. His heart slammed so hard he thought it might break through his chest. Rebecca stepped closer, her sadness shifting into urgency. She told him she didn't die the way everyone believed. She said her death wasn't an accident, and that the person responsible was someone he trusted completely. Tommy was about to hear a truth that would tear apart the last 5 years of his life. But could he handle what his wife was about to reveal? He forced himself upright, gripping the tree to steady himself. His legs felt weak, but he had to face her. He asked the only question that mattered. What truth? What did she mean? Rebecca's eyes filled again with tears, but her voice stayed calm. She told him to listen carefully, to stay steady, and to understand she was there because their daughter was still in danger. That single word cut through Tommy's shock instantly. Lily, his 8-year-old girl. Whatever this was, whatever impossible thing was happening, it involved his child. His thoughts began to sharpen. The disbelief faded, replaced by a father's fierce instinct to protect. Rebecca explained she had tried to reach him for years, but lacked the strength to appear physically. She had been there for Lily's birthdays, her first school days, the nights Tommy cried himself to sleep, but she could only watch, unseen and powerless. Tonight was different because the threat had grown closer. The man who killed her was now closing in on Lily, and Rebecca finally had the power to stop it. Tommy's jaw tightened. Someone had taken Rebecca's life. The official report claimed she'd fallen down the basement stairs and broken her neck. It was labeled an accident. There had been no investigation, no hint of foul play. When Tommy mentioned the accident, Rebecca shook her head. She told him it had been staged. Someone had carefully arranged her body to make it appear like a fall. Someone who knew the house inside and out. Someone who had easy access. Someone Tommy would never suspect because he trusted him completely. Backup was getting closer now. He could hear sirens faintly in the distance, maybe 8 minutes away, but he couldn't move. He stood frozen, waiting for Rebecca to continue. She took a slow breath and warned that the name of her killer would destroy him, but he had to hear it. He had to believe it, and he had to act before it was too late. The next words would turn Tommy's best friend into his deadliest enemy. 5 years of loyalty and brotherhood were about to turn to dust. Rebecca said the name clearly. Derek Petton, Tommy's best friend since the academy. His partner for 3 years. The man who had helped him pack Rebecca's belongings after her death. The man who still visited twice a week to check on Lily and take her for ice cream. Tommy's first reaction was disbelief. He shook his head, telling Rebecca she was wrong. Derek had cried at her funeral. Derek had been there through every dark hour of the last 5 years. Derek was Lily's godfather. This couldn't be true. It had to be some mistake or a cruel trick. But Rebecca's expression didn't waver. She told him to hear the whole story before dismissing it. She explained that Derek had been showing interest in her for months before her death. Lingering glances when Tommy wasn't looking. Comments that crossed the line between friendly and inappropriate. Unexpected visits when he was on night shifts. Rebecca noticed all of it but stayed silent. She didn't want to ruin Tommy's closest friendship over what she hoped was just awkward behavior. She convinced herself he would back off eventually. She made excuses, thinking speaking up would be too complicated, too messy, and likely misunderstood. Then came that Wednesday night in May, 5 years ago. Tommy was on the overnight shift. Lily, 3 years old, slept upstairs. Rebecca had just finished tidying the kitchen when she heard the back door open. She assumed Tommy had returned early. But it wasn't Tommy, it was Derek. He had used the spare key Tommy gave him for emergencies. Rebecca told him to leave, that it was late and wrong for him to be there. Derek refused. He said he'd waited long enough. He claimed Rebecca had led him on with her smiles and kindness. He said she owed him a chance. Rebecca stayed calm for Lily's sake, not wanting to wake her daughter with screams. She warned Derek firmly that he needed to leave immediately or she would call the police. Derek laughed. He reminded her he was a cop. Who would believe her over him? What Derek did next would haunt Tommy forever. The worst part? Tommy had trusted this monster into their home. Derek grabbed Rebecca before she could reach her phone. She fought with everything she had, scratching, kneeing, struggling to break free, but Derek was stronger and had planned this carefully. He forced her into the basement, where the sounds would be muffled. Rebecca's thoughts were with Lily peacefully asleep 2 floors above, unaware her mother was fighting for her life. Derek's persistence turned into violence the moment Rebecca rejected him. He told her it was her fault for being kind, for giving him hope. When he finally got what he wanted, Rebecca was barely conscious. But he couldn't let her live. She would tell Tommy everything. His career would be over, his life ruined. So Derek made a choice that turned him from predator to murderer. He positioned her body at the foot of the basement stairs. He wiped down every surface. Then he called Tommy at the station 2 hours later, voice trembling with fake panic, saying he had stopped by to drop off files and found the back door unlocked. He claimed he had discovered Rebecca's body and already called emergency services. He acted the part of devastated friend perfectly. Tommy remembered that night vividly. Derek had been the one to meet him at the hospital. He had held Tommy while he broke down. He had helped explain to 3-year-old Lily why Mommy wasn't coming home. And Tommy had never suspected a thing because why would he? Derek was family. Rebecca told Tommy she had tried countless times to reach him over the years. She had caused lights to flicker, knocked over picture frames, anything to get his attention. But Tommy had dismissed it as old house quirks or coincidence. He didn't believe in ghosts or spirits or anything beyond what he could see and touch. She explained that Derek had continued visiting because he wanted to keep watch. He wanted to make sure nothing tied him to Rebecca's death. Recently, Derek had started looking at Lily in the same way he once looked at Rebecca. Lily was only 8, but Derek was already planning his next move. Rebecca's warning was clear. He wouldn't stop. And Tommy had been inviting him into their home twice a week, giving him access to the daughter he'd promised to protect. Rage boiled inside Tommy like nothing he had ever felt. His hands clenched so tightly, his knuckles went white. 5 years of grief, struggling to raise Lily alone, blaming himself for working that night shift. And all the while, the man comforting him was the one who destroyed everything. Rebecca saw the fury building in Tommy's eyes. She told him to turn that anger into action, not revenge. She needed him to be smart, to protect Lily, and to make sure Derek faced real justice, not just Tommy's fists. She reminded him he was a cop, a father, a man who believed in the law. Sirens were close now, maybe 2 minutes away. Rebecca's form began to flicker, like a weak signal on a screen. She told Tommy her time was almost up. She'd given every ounce of strength to appear tonight and couldn't do it again. This was his one chance to hear the truth directly from her. Tommy asked desperately how he could prove any of this. Rebecca had been buried 5 years ago. There was no evidence, no witnesses, except a 3-year-old asleep upstairs. Derek had covered his tracks perfectly. It would be Tommy's word against a decorated officer with a spotless record. Rebecca told him to dig deeper into that night. Derek had been confident but not perfect. She said to check his patrol logs from that evening. Derek claimed he was on duty, but he swung by the house during his break. She remembered seeing scratches on his face and neck from their struggle. Check incident reports from the days after her death. See if Derek called in sick or adjusted shifts to hide his injuries. She also told Tommy to review Derek's phone records. He had been obsessively calling and texting Rebecca in the weeks leading up to her death. She had deleted the messages to avoid confrontation, but the call records would still exist in the phone company's archives. Most importantly, she told him to have her body exhumed. A proper autopsy would reveal injuries that didn't match a simple fall down the stairs. The headlights of the backup cruiser appeared through the trees. Rebecca's image was fading quickly, becoming almost transparent. She told Tommy she loved him and Lily more than anything in the world. She urged him to be strong, to stay smart, and to keep their daughter safe. Then she said something that made Tommy's blood run cold. Derek was planning to visit tomorrow afternoon to take Lily to the movies. Rebecca vanished just as Officer Jensen stepped out of the cruiser. Tommy was alone on that empty forest road with an abandoned car and a mission that could either bring justice or ruin his credibility forever. He told Jensen he'd suffered a medical episode, maybe exhaustion from double shifts. He claimed the driver had fled into the woods before backup arrived. Jensen accepted the explanation and helped him back to his cruiser. Tommy knew he sounded shaken, but Jensen assumed it was the health scare. He didn't mention Rebecca. Who would have believed him? The next morning, Tommy called Derek and canceled the movie plan, saying Lily had a stomach bug. Derek sounded disappointed but understanding. That friendly, concerned tone made Tommy sick. He was speaking to his wife's killer and had to pretend everything was normal. Over the next week, Tommy worked quietly. He pulled Derek's patrol logs from that night 5 years ago and found inconsistencies. Derek had logged a meal break from 8 to 9 p.m. But that didn't align with his supposed discovery of Rebecca's body. At 10 p.m., Tommy requested archived phone records through official channels, claiming it was for a cold case review. The records revealed 43 calls and over 100 texts from Derek to Rebecca in the month before her death. He contacted the medical examiner who handled Rebecca's autopsy. The initial examination had been cursory, since her death appeared accidental. But when Tommy pressed for details, the examiner admitted that the bruising patterns didn't match a simple fall. There were defensive wounds on Rebecca's hands that hadn't been properly documented. The examiner agreed to support an exhumation request. Tommy built his case carefully, just as Rebecca had instructed. He brought everything privately to his captain, explaining that new evidence suggested Rebecca's death wasn't accidental, omitting the part about seeing her ghost. The captain was skeptical at first, but the phone records and patrol log inconsistencies were enough to open an investigation. Derek was brought in for questioning 3 weeks after that night on the forest road. He claimed innocence at first, but when confronted with the call records and timeline gaps, his story began to crumble. He said the calls were innocent, that Rebecca had been a friend. But investigators uncovered deleted voicemails on the phone company servers, where Derek's tone shifted from friendly to aggressive to threatening. Rebecca's body was exhumed. A thorough autopsy confirmed what she had told Tommy. Injuries consistent with assault and strangulation, not a fall. DNA under her fingernails matched Derek Pettin. He was arrested and charged with rape and murder. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Tommy testified about Derek's suspicious behavior in the days after Rebecca's death. The scratches on his face he had dismissed as a scuffle with a suspect. Other colleagues shared observations they had ignored at the time. Derek's defense fell apart under the weight of forensic evidence and testimony. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Derek Pettin was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Tommy sat in the courtroom thinking about Rebecca's tears on that forest road and the courage it must have taken to cross the barrier between life and death. He never saw Rebecca again, but sometimes when he tucked Lily into bed, he felt a presence, a warmth, a peace that hadn't been there before. Tommy had spent 5 years thinking he failed to protect his wife. Now he understood he had been given a second chance to protect his daughter. Justice had been served, but the cost was realizing he had trusted a monster for 5 years. He had to live with that truth. He had to explain to Lily, now 8, why Uncle Derek wouldn't be visiting. He kept the full story from her, planning to reveal it when she was older. For now, she just needed to know she was safe. Do you think Tommy made the right choice, carefully building a case instead of confronting Derek directly? Could you have shown that restraint knowing what Derek had done? Sometimes, the hardest part of justice isn't catching the criminal. It's holding yourself back long enough to make sure they actually pay for their crimes. If this story moved you, hit like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us what you would have done in Tommy's place. And subscribe, because we bring real stories of real justice every week. Remember, the truth always finds a way to surface, even when it seems buried forever.